live and recorded for later viewing on Lunenburg Public Access. There were no communications downstairs, so we'll skip that. Someone did ask about public comment. We do only state it at the beginning of the meeting, but after any presentation, anyone with any questions, once the presentation is complete, is welcome to look to be identified for raising any questions you might have. And we'll make that available. So if at any time you do have a question or you want to be recognized, just give us a sign. Do we have any public comment from the committee? No? Any public comment from the public? No? Okay, then we will go ahead and proceed with the department budget presentations tonight are the fire and police. So we'll start with Chief Sullivan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me all right on this? Okay. Again, we put fire department on the side of the trucks for the benefit of the people that haven't heard my story here. Fire department's really more of an all hazards response agency. If it doesn't involve law enforcement, we're usually involved in some way, shape, or form, whether it's fire, medical emergencies, technical rescues, hazardous materials, assist the public. We're usually involved in that in some way, shape, or form. Currently, the department's made up of a chief, one full-time administrative assistant, who's also the EMS coordinator, and an EMT, 4 career firefighter EMTs, 5 call fire officers that are EMTs, and approximately 38 on-call firefighters and EMTs. We operate 3 engine companies, 1 ladder, 2 forestry units, 2 ambulances that are licensed to the advanced EMT level, and 4 utility and support vehicles. Our staffing currently, we were able to increase our total hours covered slightly with the addition of the 1 full-time person, July 1. So we cover approximately 64 hours, or 64% of the hours in the week now that the station is manned. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., there are 2 to 3 firefighter EMTs in the station. Combination of the career staff working a 48-hour-a-week schedule, and 84 hours of per diem coverage blended in with that, which the per diem is some of my call firefighter EMTs working at their hourly rate to staff the station. Myself and my administrative assistant are also there Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, and can assist on calls when we're available. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Friday and Saturday night, the station is staffed currently. That was an addition we were able to do as of July 1 with the addition of the additional full-time personnel. Combination, it's 2 firefighter EMTs, combination of either career and or per diem. Saturday and Sunday day, there are 2 per diem firefighters, EMTs in the station. And then Sunday through Thursday, we are on call. We pay a couple of the EMTs a $50 stipend to be on call and available for ambulance calls, but other than that, we all respond from home. The tones go out over the radio, we pick them up on our home or personal monitors. Personnel respond into the station, pick up the apparatus, and respond out. The full-time personnel come back on recalls when they're available, same as that. Other duties that we handle, obviously, fire prevention, safety education. We don't just chase fires and ambulance calls. A lot of the time, we're involved in code enforcement, inspections. Fire prevention officer is busy pretty much every day, nearly all of his shift. That's why one of the reasons we keep 3 people on in the daytime is that often he is tied up on inspections, and the other 2 can handle calls, and he can break away if there's something serious. We have to do smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector inspections, underground oil tanks, places of assembly, places that have liquor licenses, new buildings. There's all involved with that, plus public education that I'll talk about a little bit further on too. We spend a lot of time in schools. We also spend time with the seniors in town on fire safety education. And over the years, they found statewide, since the education's become a much larger component, it's actually made a difference. There's also obviously administrative and support, maintenance, ongoing training that I'll talk about a little bit more along, and data collection, and I'm also the emergency management director, so a lot of those functions sort of dovetail in with the fire department as well. Again, just some of the things we train on, like the police will talk about as well, we face increasing training requirements. The addition in the budget last year of, excuse me, losing my voice here, of $12,000 has helped. A lot of our training has been on our members' own time. That's been able to fund at least paying them for some of that time. The EMTs have to do 40 to 48 hours of training every 2 years. We train every other Monday night for the firefighters. Plus, there's additional training that I'll talk about further on into it for apparatus operation, hazardous materials. I can go on and on, but the job is becoming much more complex as time goes on and requires a lot more training, which is one of the things that affects maintaining the on-call people as well, too. Just a quick breakdown on our call volume. We did 2,107 calls last year, including inspections. The big number is 1,022 EMS runs. We saw an overall increase in runs of 3%. We saw a 6% increase on EMS runs, which is looking at about a 15-year average. That's about the track that we've been operating at, that we're continuing to see an increase every year. That's just a general chart of responses by year going back 10 years. And it just shows, again, a steady progression of our call volume increase. This was a couple slides that I put in last year just to show some of the effect of the number of runs from new development. When people question that, they always think of impact of the new developments on the school system. It also impacts public safety. These are from most of the large-scale projects in town: Emerald Place, Tri-Town, Riley Road, White's Woods, Cortland Circle. I've added in Butterfly Lane into that. That's not a large development. Rogers Way has been added in, but that really we haven't seen an impact from that yet. But on the column on the left, those are the runs per year that we get. And obviously you can see it impacts our EMS call volume significantly. That's just sort of by project. Obviously, Emerald Place is the largest project. We see the most business out of that. But again, all of these impact the calls for service. There's more people, there's more demand for service. I don't have 2017's numbers because unfortunately George was laid up for a little bit, but he was very helpful in determining the age ranges in town. The census data has shown how we see an increase in the over 55 population in town, which dovetails exactly with our call volume on the EMS side. That's where our increase is. Lunenburg is really not much different than a lot of other communities. People are aging. The baby boomers are aging. People are living longer. That's where our demand for service is. We're seeing that more and more. We do chase grants. Last year, we were able to obtain an emergency preparedness grant for $2,700 or $2,750. That was able to purchase some specialized protective equipment for the EMTs and for some water rescue equipment. We also were able to get the SAFE grant. This is funding for public education, safety awareness and training, both in the schools and with the seniors. It's also helped continue our smoke detector project in conjunction with the senior center, the Sand for Seniors, that we would work on getting sand to people that are homebound, that need sand for their sidewalks, and in turn, the fire prevention officer, Captain Reese, would inspect the homes and see if they needed smoke detectors. And through grant money, we were able to have some that if they had none or they were completely obsolete, we could replace their smoke detectors. We were finding better than half the homes we were going into had either none or they had ones that were obsolete 20 years ago. So it certainly made a difference in the community. I'll talk later on, and we did apply for a grant to replace one of the vehicles last year. We were turned down on that, but I'll touch on that when we get to capital. For proposed budget, the salary increases on the target budget were basically contractual and step raises. My above target requests, again, and I know you've heard this before, but it was for 27 24-hour, 7-day-a-week staffing in the station. And also moving the ambulance service to the paramedic level. We currently operate at the advanced level. It's a step below paramedic. Right now, we rely on other services to assist us with paramedic level care. And this would be, as part of staffing the station, would be bringing that paramedic level care to our department. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And some of the other requests were for, in the budget, were to support moving to that paramedic level. Those were the salary line items. The increase, 2019 is with the above target request, along with the overtime, and that is to fund 5 additional full-time personnel. I currently have 4. The target we see is 9 total, including with the current staff, to provide an officer and a firefighter officer, EMT, and a paramedic, 24/7 with a third person during the daytime. Weekdays, when most of our call people work out of town. The days of having a lot of people in town and available that they can leave their jobs is kind of gone. We don't have a lot of our call personnel, so we need an extra person. Again, this again would put 2 people to get the ambulance out the door or the first fire truck. It's enough to get the fire truck out, not a lot of manpower on it, but it's at least to get it going. And they would still be backed up by the existing call force. We would still need just as many call people as we've got now. As again, that's really, we're 1 call deep, that we could cover an ambulance call or at least get the first fire truck out. Again, reasons for staffing: faster response time, having people in the station. That's vitally important in our business. Whether it's cardiac arrest, whether it's a fire, time is important to us. And that, I'll talk about that a little bit further on too. Also, it's a reduced load on the call force. Our call volume has gone up and up. When I started back in the 80s, we did about 200 or 300 calls a year. Wasn't that tough. When you take out the inspections, we're doing over 1,500 calls a year. It's a lot to try to handle on a call basis. It's expecting people to be out 1, 2, 3 times a night for an hour or plus at a whack, and then go to their regular job. When you maybe did that once a week, or once every other week, it wasn't a big deal. Now, when you're doing it almost every night, that can start to be a strain. Having staffing in the station would help alleviate that. Increased training requirements too, I'll touch on that. That's another challenge for both recruitment and retention with our call personnel. And again, the staffing would also allow us to provide paramedic level care to our residents. That just is a quick slide, and it just takes a little bit of an explanation, but basically the top graph shows the percent of the time during the week that we have been staffed going back to 1998. Back then we were only about 24%. Now we're currently 64%. The bottom slide just shows in that same time frame how fast the call volume has gone up, or how much it's increased. The call volume that we have experienced, the staffing has not kept up with it. And fortunately, we're starting to see some of that. Having 1 more guy has made a difference in that somewhat, but it's a start. Again, we talk about time. I'm not going to spend a lot of the time on the different definitions here. We've talked about that before. Most of you have heard me on that. The important thing for us is get the truck out the door as quickly as possible. These are national standards. They usually want you to, try to have somebody on scene in less than 4 minutes. And if you need like paramedics or something, within 8 minutes. From our station right now, from the time you leave, just to give you an idea, because this is a large town, the area marked in red is where we can get to in about 4 minutes. So we're already sort of behind the 8 ball. And that's from when the truck rolls out the door. To make that 100%, you'd need multiple stations, a lot more people, not what we're discussing here. We just want to be able to at least shave some time off of that. Normally, when the station's been staffed, we're under 2 minutes out the door. I think that time's probably a little on the high side, working with the regional dispatch center. A lot of times there, by the time the truck's rolling out, their second announcement walks over us. We're halfway there by the time we sign on. But stations not staffed, we've been about 4 minutes. Sometimes that's been higher. Honestly, that number's been a little bit lower because I've had a lot of younger firefighters. I had the college interns that were at the station. I had people there a lot of the time. Unfortunately, that's starting to disappear, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. That just gives you an idea, time of day, that, yeah, we are busy during the daytime, but we're also busy right into the evening, and even overnight. And that it's not strictly just the call volume drops right off at night, and that we still do see a fair amount of activity, in the evenings. This, again, we talk about time, cardiac arrest. Person's chance of survival decreases by 7 to 10% for each minute that they're not getting CPR, they're not getting an AED to their side, or advanced care. This is why it's so important for us to get the response out the door, cut that time down. Again, as we talked about before, I don't have the fancy video that goes along with it. This graph is a little tough to read, but it basically says the same thing. Back in the old days with the old style furniture, natural fiber contents, things like that, it took nearly 29 minutes before a room would light up, the whole room would ignite, the fire would be burning out like the front door. Nowadays, with modern furniture, it's all synthetics, it happens in about 4 minutes. A lot faster time. They talk about, yeah, fires are down. Yes, they are. Unfortunately, we're finding the property loss hasn't changed that much. The fires that aren't as frequent, but the ones that we have are much hotter, they burn faster, and they cause a lot more damage. Where it's, again, much more important to get somebody there quickly. Hopefully we can get water on the fire, stop it before it reaches that point. And again, staff, one of the things I talk about was training time, retention. There's a lot, as we mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of, training involved. It takes about 4 to 5 months of training for basic call volunteer recruit program at the Fire Academy. These people are going for 200 to 300 hours, basically 2 nights a week, and every Saturday for 4 months. EMT is another 3 to 4 months, about 140 hours. If these people are going to get qualified to drive the apparatus, it's about another 4 to 6 months, between 40 hours of classroom that we do, and then they're required to put in 25 hours actually going out operating the equipment, training with a qualified operator, because we don't really want to take somebody out of a Toyota and put them in a $600,000 truck with zero training. That doesn't usually end well. So again, take somebody that I can use as a per diem firefighter, it takes about 18 to 24 months for me to get them really trained up where they are. And unfortunately, what we see is in 5 years, a lot of them are gone, or they've gone on somewhere else, or their availability isn't quite as much. The challenge we have now is years ago, call firefighters, you had a lot of people, they had they worked in some other job, and they were a part-time firefighter, and they were really happy with that. You don't see that as much with everybody's, I'm sure all of you know how busy your lives are, and that now picture adding in every other week going to train, a couple nights a week, taking off after classes, giving up some weekends for training, and that. It's a big commitment. What you see now is I get a lot younger people that all want to make this a career, and this is a start for them. And that's what I've run into is I have a very young department, they're very gung-ho, they're great guys, but their goal is to work full-time somewhere. Like I said, the statistic I had over 10 years ago, in that time we'd put 24 people on, we'd lost 52 for various reasons. And that just in the last year, I've had 5 call members hired as full-time firefighters somewhere else, and I lost another one who just, joined the Army. And that I might get him back in 4 years if he comes back. But some of my call members that are full-timers somewhere else, I still have them on a limited basis. Some of them I haven't seen at all. The other challenge is having candidates that live in town. Call basis, you need people to be able to respond quickly. I'm finding more and more that I'm looking at people further and further away just to have the numbers and that to have people that can respond. I don't have as many in town. And like I mentioned, it's a time commitment. It's a lot of time commitment. When we tell new candidates, this is a lot of work. You go to a call once in a while, it's not a big deal. Then they realize how busy we really are and how much the commitment is. And unfortunately, you see some people, they have to make hard decisions between other jobs, family, things like that, and sometimes we're the ones who come up short. Per diem, we run 84 hours a week. We increased that slightly last year to be able to help along with the other full-timer to cover those 2 nights a week. I used to have 15 firefighters, right now I have 15 to cover 84 hours a week. Last year, at the beginning of last year, I had 22 to cover 72 hours a week. Again, it takes me a while to get people trained up, have them be able to work at that level, and then sometimes I lose them. The other challenge we have with per diems, again, is they're part-time people. If one of them doesn't show up, you know, it's a little tough to order in a part-time person to stay. We have challenges with that. We've had discussions before. People who work consistently over 20 hours a week can qualify for benefits with the town. I haven't had any that hit that yet, but as those numbers, the number of available people come down, that could potentially be an issue down the road. The advanced life support part, paramedic, we currently operate at the advanced level. We've been doing that for about a year. Advanced EMTs can do some advanced skills. They can do IVs. They can do some airway control. They can push some medications. What they can't do is cardiac monitoring, cardiac pacing. They can't do cardiac medications. They also can't do, you know, hard pain control medications and that. Advanced EMT training is about 6 months, paramedics a year to 18 months. And that much more schooling, much more involved. Right now, for full paramedic level care, we utilize outside services. They meet up with us, their paramedic transports with our crew, and that we pay them a flat fee for their service. What we've run into is the whole area is busier. We're finding that they're not as available. We've had multiple times where we're either calling agencies as far away as Air. A couple times we've had to intercept with Sterling, going down towards UMass. We don't have, the paramedic availability isn't there sometimes. Providing it in-house ourselves, the better availability. We know somebody's going to be there. Quicker response. Even now in town, you may be waiting for a paramedic truck to meet up with our unit coming from a distance away, and that we can get them a little bit quicker. If there's a problem or a question on something, they're our own people. We have better oversight of it versus trying to follow up on something with someone else. We have an excellent medical director. He works really well with us. But with another agency, sometimes you have better luck than others trying to follow up on something. And we'll also take in some additional income out of that as well too, and I'll touch on that. Just quickly, I won't spend a lot of time on these numbers, but I can certainly answer some questions on them. Potential increased revenue. The 57,534 is about what we spend a year paying these other ALS services for their service, for their paramedic to help us out. The 36,214 is what we have estimated that we would see with, these are the calls that we should have had a paramedic, but we didn't have one available, that we would have somebody, or that, yeah, because there's a paramedic there, we might have canceled the paramedic unit to let them take a more serious call, but where we have one right there, we could treat them at that level. There is a potential for us to be called for other communities, like we do with other towns now. We could bill for that. I wouldn't see us being a huge provider of mutual aid, since most of the communities around here are already paramedic. But again, it would be normal backup. And our estimated, and that's a conservative number, would be about 131,000, and that we would anticipate taking in. Why not more, you would ask? One of the things we looked into when we studied this, 64% of our transports are Medicare, Medicaid, governmental type insurance, that it's a fixed rate. We have to accept what they pay. That goes right along with our, a lot of our customers are older. They may be on that kind of insurance. But we can charge, we can up our rates as much as we want. They're only going to pay so much. So there's a diminishing return on us increasing the ambulance rates, which we can and probably should do at some point, but it's not, a lot of towns running an enterprise fund on that. I don't see us being able to do that. We can offset some of our cost, but with our demographics, it doesn't work. Some potential savings in the budget. We have a stipend for an officer to be on call on the weekends. As we transition to always having a shift supervisor on, that $10,400 would go away. We'd be paying one of the on-call officers to be around. We also pay the EMT stipend for the hard call for EMTs to be on call 5 nights a week. Right now, that's about $26,000. That would go away in that. So there's about a little over $36,000 that's potential savings within the budget. Taking that all together and what we would anticipate in additional expenses, not capital expenses, but ongoing, medication costs, equipment costs, things like that, we anticipate about, $15,500 per year. So total cost of the staffing could theoretically be offset by $151,584. And again, these are conservative numbers. They could probably be better than that, but I'd rather go low than overstate it. Other grants that are out there, the SAFER grant is funding for people. We put in for that last year. We didn't get it. It's coming up again soon. We will probably put in for that again. And theoretically, that would cover 75% of the salaries for these people for 2 years, 35% the third year. The town would be picking it up after that. What that would do, if by some chance we got it, would give us the personnel to get the 24-hour coverage in the station and then continue right on into the paramedic level. It's by no means assured. It's a very competitive grant. A lot of them seem to be going more to the large cities than they are to the smaller communities that are trying to get 24-hour coverage. Yeah, but we'll give it the college try. Other benefits, again, having somebody at the station all the time would put somebody there 24/7 to answer questions, address the public, deal with anything that comes in. It would expand some of the hours to be able to do inspections, fire prevention. Right now, that's Monday through Friday during the daytime. Could potentially help out people that aren't around weekdays, might need an inspection on the weekend. There would be somebody available. And having people there, your career people often become your training cater for your call people, and that you'd have more training opportunities as well for our personnel. The expense line items, most of these would be directly connected to, that was part of that $15,500 that I mentioned, that would be increases for maintenance of the equipment, cost of medications, things like that. Our medical control fee would most likely go up. That's based on population. Right now, they don't charge us full because we're only running at the advanced level. I would expect that to go up $5,000 to $7,000 if we went to the full paramedic level. One thing I would note, increases in EMS supplies. That is a lot where we've run short consistently every year. I end up moving money around in the budget from fire or other equipment or other sources to fund that. The additional funding in EMS supplies would be something I'd be looking for regardless whether we're ALS or not. That's something we've kind of been behind on for several years. And I have to rob Peter to pay Paul to make that work. So it means we're either putting off replacing fire equipment or there's something else that we should be doing that we're not. Capital expense for the paramedic is currently in FY 20 and 21. It's roughly $41,000 per ambulance. $35,000 of that is for a cardiac monitor, defibrillator. That's the one largest expense. Most of it, the other stuff is incidental. A lot of the equipment, what's fortunate for us, a lot of the equipment we already have, being at the advanced level and at the intermediate level prior to that, so we already have it in-house. My thought would be fit out one truck 1 year, fit out the second truck the second year going along, rather than try to do it all in 1 year. To move into vehicle maintenance and capital stuff again a little bit, I'll talk about the capital plan in a little bit, but again, some of our apparatus is aging. Repair costs have gone up. I've put quite a bit of money into the ladder truck. I'm still waiting on a bill for a 2008 engine that just went out for a bunch of work being done on it. We've had some savings through using the DPW mechanic, but unfortunately the trucks are fairly complex. A lot of it has to go back to the dealership. There's also, again, limitations on what the DPW has for equipment and training on stuff like that. So we have to sub out a lot of the stuff. Again, we operate 3 engines, one of which doubles a heavy rescue unit, the ladder truck, 2 forestries, 2 ambulances, a water rescue unit, which is just one of the old ambulances, and 3 support vehicles. The capital plan this year, I had put in for engine 4, which is actually, it says 22, it's 23 years old this year. The ladder, which will be 30, 31, and rescue 2. Understanding currently the capital planning is recommending the ladder truck, which is good. That one, we're finding more and more at 30 years old and having been rebuilt once, we're starting to find more and more just metal fatigue, wear and tear. We had to replace springs on it. There's, the radiator brackets are damaged or cracked. We're gonna have to work on that. There's some aerial components on that. It's 30 years old. It's tired. We got our money out of that. When we bought that truck secondhand, the plan was to get 10 years out of it. We're on 12 or 13 right now. So, and again, engine 4, this is year 3 for that. We've cut down on the use of that truck using the newer engine, but eventually that's gonna get 2. Planned life expectancy for a fire truck, for a pumper, is about 20 years. Ladder truck is about 25. The ambulances are 10 to 12. The support vehicles are about 10. Based on past experience and what we see, when you start hitting that point, you're starting to see the maintenance costs start going up and up. The other challenge and the bigger problem for me is when they're out of, when they're being worked on, they're out of service. And it's increased downtime when you might need that truck or that vehicle for something. And that's a problem. And the more it's out of service, the more downtime you've got, or the more fear that something's gonna break when you're in the middle of a call. Some of the other things, again, this is just 5 years out. I mentioned, the potential ALS equipment. Air packs are coming up. Again, those usually have about a 10 to 12 year lifespan. Again, grant funding potentially for that we'll try for. The last time, back in 08, 09, 2010, we tried for that, we didn't get it. We had to approach capital planning for that. Again, that's the cycle for the vehicles. Last year, we applied for an Assistance to Firefighters grant to replace Ladder 1. We didn't get it. We've put in again for it this year. Obviously, I'm not holding my breath on it. These are very competitive, and if we were awarded it, the town would be responsible for 10% of the total, and like it was last year. So again, to wrap this up, impact of the budget as recommended, we'd be status quo operationally, covered 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 2 nights. 5 nights a week, we're still on call, so the response times are extended. We still have challenges recruiting call firefighters. The college program, we finally may have one new potential live-in candidate coming from Mount Wachusett Fire Science Program. We're looking at a few new call people. We just had 2 graduate the call volunteer recruit program. Now they have to work on their EMT, so they're gonna be working on that. Again, the coverage challenges are still there. We've been making it work, but again, we're stretching the rubber band pretty tight. And it's hard to get the people around, get enough people to cover what we need to cover. And again, I've mentioned about the ambulance supplies and that we're robbing other parts of the budget to support that. The above target funding, if I was given the 5 people, we could provide 24/7 coverage out of the station, 7 days a week, and we could move on to going to full paramedic level. Understand currently the budget is being discussed for 1 person. I'll take it. And how exactly we're gonna fit them in the schedule yet has yet to be determined. We're working out to see what the best option is, especially if we're looking at paramedic training for that person too. That may take up a lot of their time, but every little bit helps. And it's moving forward. And I can't mention that. I think we probably should have had this a long time ago. For a lot of reasons it never happened, and like many other things we're finding in the community, we're playing catch up now. But this is something that we need to keep moving forward on. We're not getting slower. I'm sure you're gonna hear the same story from Chief Marino. He's in the same boat, and that his calls for service are going up and up, and that we're getting busier and busier. And that's it. Ran a little longer than I planned on. Any questions?
You did very well. Thank you.
Managed to keep my voice.
You did. Just a couple questions I have was, the overtime salaries, you had identified a large over target amount for overtime.
I did, and that's as best I can figure, right now, we cover probably 60% of like shift coverages and that with per diem.
Okay.
As we add more full-time people, it's their right of first refusal to work. As we have more shifts, more coverage, I would anticipate that those people would start covering more of their own shifts. And that I wouldn't be seeing as much per diem coverage on that. Again, that's based on having, 9 people working
Okay.
total.
So then the amount that was approved was taking into consideration that that number didn't get hit with the 9 positions? So that would be okay for given,
It should be.
Okay.
There might be some opportunity to use per diem in there, but that's gonna be a contractual thing. And I would anticipate, especially once we start running 24/7 paramedic, you're gonna need to keep a paramedic on shift all the time.
Right.
Currently, I have 2 call paramedics,
Okay.
both of which work full-time somewhere else.
all right, then in terms of the paramedic, does that affect the contract at all? In terms of,
At this time, currently, we have a position for firefighter paramedic. And that was just negotiated recently. So we do have a job title and position and pay scale for that.
okay, so that basically when we looked at what the potential revenues were, that it would potentially also be offset by an increase in salary per?
Yes. The numbers the numbers that I put in there was based on that firefighter paramedic rate. So the number that was put in there for those 5 additional personnel are based on I think I used a step 3 firefighter paramedic of this new pay scale.
Okay, but
So
not the current, but not the current. So,
No.
Okay.
It's not based on it was based on what we had, the pay scale that has been approved, but we don't have any people in that position.
I'm sorry, I'm not being, it's not based on the current firefighters that you have as if they were rated at paramedic?
No,
Okay,
no. It was based on the
okay,
total
just
of
if the
9.
new ones came, okay,
Yes,
so you were
yes.
identifying that. Anyone else with questions? Mark?
I have just a couple. You had a slide on the shift coverage. It's on
Yes.
our page 7. If you want to go back
Give me a
to
second to
that.
go back. The current shift coverage?
Runs by time of day.
Oh, all right.
Yes. Right. So have you considered, what would the impact be of shifting the staff coverage to the right on that chart? It looks like there's a period of time during which we're staffed where the calls or runs is relatively small, and then late in the day, it's much greater.
To an extent. The
Could
other
you
challenge,
shift that?
the big challenge I face there is 6 a.m., and this is something we've looked at for a long time. So most of my call people are going off to their regular jobs and that. We find that the reason we've gone with the 12-hour shift to 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and trust me, my guys would tell you, they don't like that schedule, but it's a function of when we start losing the call people. Most of them are heading out of town at that hour, so that's why we start off at that time frame. By 6 p.m., we're starting to see them, usually people start getting back in town 5, 6 o'clock.
Right.
Somewhere. So that's really the function there.
Okay, good, thank you. On our page 10, there's a slide, potential increased revenue.
Let me
I think
skip
this,
back to that there.
I think this was if we were to have ALS services.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand the context for this a little bit better.
You're looking at this one or the total number?
Nope, that one. So you've got a total estimated increase in revenue. So my question would be, what's the cost of that revenue? So if we're providing ALS services, I assume there's a cost associated with those ALS services? It would be offset by an increase in revenue.
Right.
But what's the increase in cost?
The anticipated expense, the offset of that, take the staffing out of it, supplies and equipment, maintenance is about $15,500 that we would anticipate, based on Westminster and Sterling,
Right.
who run paramedic level service, and have approximately the same call volume. That's based on equipment, medications, things like that, things that we may not necessarily be able to bill for. Did that answer your,
No.
okay.
There must be additional staffing cost.
The staffing cost would be the number that we gave you for the 5 additional people.
Oh, so
That's-
that's the impact of all 5. You're saying,
The number that was in the,
That's 363.
yes, whatever. If you, I don't have it right in front of me there.
Yeah.
But that was the budget, that's the salaries in the fire budget for 5 additional personnel. And the estimated overtime that would be associated with that.
so this is potential increased revenue if we were to staff with 5 additional positions?
With 5 additional people. We could staff with 5 additional firefighter EMTs,
Right.
but we would not generate that level of revenue because we can't charge for that level.
So if you then upped it from EMT to ALS?
You would see some of that money stay here. We're not paying it out to another service. And that, and there's, like I said, there's some calls, that either paramedics weren't available or they were tied up in a more serious call. The ones that now we have someone there, we can treat them at that level. So there's a potential. Like I said, I don't ever see this as, it would offset the cost of staffing the station. It would offset some of it. It's not gonna, I'd love to say I could make it a full enterprise account, but just the demographics in the town doesn't, when we've studied it, it doesn't work,
Right.
so.
And then just one last question from me, and maybe this is just to clarify. In your wrap-up, you said that the budget as recommended, not the above target,
Correct.
would be status quo.
Status quo, we would cover 5 days.
But we've added a position,
We have added 1 position, so we're covering 64% of the hours in the week. So that's where we're at. The original page where I mentioned we cover 7 days a week, 6 hours, or 12 hours a day, with 2 to 3 firefighters, and then 2 nights a week with 2 firefighters. That's where we would continue to stay at. If we potentially add 1 more person, July 1, not 5, I'm sure we can cover some additional time out of that. How much exact time yet? We're still working that out on where we could use that person the most. And if that person's gonna end up looking at some sort of paramedic training to get them to that level, there's gonna be some time that, they're gonna be away.
so it's not status quo, it's not yet known.
As, the slide is as of, if the budget goes with the target, not the above target, the target amounts that are recommended, we'll add 1 more person, we might be able to marginally increase coverage, whether we'll gain 1 more, maybe down to 4 nights a week that we're on call, I can't say yet, because we're
Right.
still trying to,
I
if
think-
we had 2 or 3 people coming on at once, I could tell you probably exactly what we could do with them. 1 person, we gotta figure out how we're gonna fit them in. And
I think we're dealing with semantics.
it could be,
There's a target budget, and
Right.
then there's a recommended
Th-
budget.
this-
The recommended budget includes 1 additional position.
right. So it's a little, all right, then it's a little bit better than status quo.
Right,
But
okay.
not, we could gain some out of that, but we still won't, 1 guy will not give us 24/7 coverage.
Right, yeah, I'm assuming that when you said that, you really meant the target budget.
I was talking, yes, I was speaking to the target budget, not the above target.
And not the recommended budget. John?
Well, yeah, I want to follow up with this, in the same vein. Your target budget is for an increase in salaries and wages of about 365,000.
The above target request, yes.
That's the above target. And your potential offset there, which is the revenue potential and and avoiding expenses, is a net of about $151,000. So your net increase for everything is about $215,000 roughly.
Yep.
The question then is there a way you can spread this increase out over a few years to minimize the cost, the effect on the budget? That is to...
Well, again, my recommendation would be hiring 5 at once. Town administrator's recommendation has been trying to hire 1 a year, which certainly decreases the your expense each year. The challenge is I really need at least 2 people that are trained as paramedics to go to that paramedic, to even start that level. And then with the state requirements say that within 3 years, you really have to be able to provide it 24/7. So you have to have somebody available. Ideally, my personal feeling, I'd love to see 2 in 1 year, 2 in the second year, and 1 in the third year to get there and do it in 3 years and that. But I also understand the funding, I'd love to see 5 all at once.
Sure.
That would be even better, but again, to spread the cost out, even 1 a year, it's gonna take longer than I would like to see, but if that's what it takes to make it happen, then that's what it's gonna take to make it happen.
And of course, the follow-up then, Chief, is would the town reap any benefits from additional revenue or cost avoidance at 2, 2, and 1? Say, if you just added 2 1 year, would you still have some cost,
You would see,
some revenue?
if you added 2, we started running at the paramedic level, you would not see that number because we would not be doing it all the time. We would still be relying on some of the other services some of the time because we'd only be staffed so many hours in the day.
Would we-
So you would see this, the number, that total number when we're at the full number of people.
But I guess I wouldn't expect us to see the total number. Would we see a portion of that number?
You would see a portion of it once you went to the paramedic level.
Okay,
And that,
thanks.
which would involve the capital outlay for at least one of the trucks and having at least 2 people, trained to the paramedic level.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, Chief, do you have outside agencies who come in and review your equipment and certify whether
The
it's...
state comes in once a year because we're considered an advanced level service. Now they come in once a year and inspect all of our equipment, inspect our records, and relicense us.
So are we getting to the point where, like, some of these trucks are getting to the point where...
The
this-
fire trucks, they don't look at so much. The ambulances, yes, the truck that I had on the list, there's a couple things on there they could gig us on that could be fixed, but it's gonna be expensive to fix. And that's why we kind of look to start turning them over at about the 10-year mark. So, fire trucks, other than commercial vehicle inspection, and that, the fire trucks, they come in, the pumps are tested every year, and that we have a company come in that we pay for, they test all the pumps and make sure they still meet their rating, and the ladders, excuse me, the aerial ladder truck, and all the ground ladders are inspected once a year. And also, actually, all the air packs, too, we go through. That's all out of the maintenance budget.
Okay, another question that I was having was related to the, the amount that was recommended for overtime. Are you finding an issue with meeting your budget number now?
Right now, no, it's gonna be tight, but we're not seeing it as much. What you see now is with the 4th person, there's always one person off duty, so they have the opportunity to, work overtime if somebody's out. So we see it a little bit more, but it's still probably 60% recovering on per diem. But I see as we go forward, that's probably that number's gonna go down, the overtime part's gonna go up. Just to be completely honest with that. The full-timers have right of first refusal and that, so.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious where that number was.
Right now, if anything, it's, I don't think salary, we're gonna be in horrible shape. Ask me again after the storm of the century is done, or any others that come along.
Right, okay. Any other question, John?
I do have one more follow-up, and that is, just occurred to me, if we do staff up the 5 people, does that mean that we will use, say, the rescue wagons more? And then therefore, does that shorten their life?
I don't know. I don't think the staffing is going to affect that. That's going to be effective how many times people are calling us.
Yeah.
And that. We're definitely seeing, to give you an example, the truck that's a 2015 already has 53,000 miles on it. And it's a function of we're taking people to Worcester more often. We're taking them to further hospitals because they need specialized care. And that, which 10 years ago, we did that maybe once a year. Now we do it a couple times a month.
So
That's probably the biggest impact on the vehicles. That and the call volume overall is increasing.
So it would be a function of the call volume as opposed to the staffing?
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Right. That wouldn't affect it. The calls are still going to be there.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and you did not present anything that shows the number of calls overnight? I did not see that on the slide.
Just the one slide, if you want me to go back to it, is staff versus unstaffed time.
Okay. I guess maybe it was just because I couldn't see it all the way to the bottom.
It's a lot of stuff to jam into a small space.
Right. Well, I can't see that far anymore either. So.
That's basically, if you look across the bottom, that's the hour of the day.
Okay,
And the left side of the screen is the number of calls during the year in that time frame, roughly.
Okay.
And each one of those bars is from 2014 through 2017 to show, and
okay, so we're basically saying that at 1 AM, the average number of calls per year is 20? Is that what I'm saying?
probably 20 to 25 in there.
Okay,
And like you say, with averages, what we'll see is you might go a couple nights that nothing happens, and then you'll get 3 or 4 runs overnight,
night.
the next
Right,
night.
right,
And
right, yeah.
It's, the problem is we can't schedule them. Be
Right.
nice to schedule them, but we can't.
right, okay.
I have one question.
Sure, go ahead, Mark.
I have one question which is about the expense line items you mentioned.
Sure.
The 2019 proposed, is that assuming the additional 5 resources, or is that?
Let me go back to that one, but yes, that was based generally on, talking here, on 5 additional people.
Okay.
I'll touch on that briefly. And the equipment, yes. The supplies, that's where I'm running short consistently already. I need to see something in that. I'm taking money out of other parts of the budget to provide the proper supplies for the ambulance. The fees and licenses is going to the paramedic level. That's exclusive of the people. That's the license, or licensing for it. The EMS research is basically what is estimated for the cost of 5 additional people at the paramedic level. The dues and membership, that's more actually is an increase for the Mutual Aid Association that the fire department is part of for the whole entire district. They provide a lot of regional functions and services. Their dues is going up, and I'd put in an amount to keep us up to date with that.
If you had to give us a bulk figure, like, let's say 18,000 is for 5 additional resources, you said that part is heavily underfunded, what would you ask for?
At least there now, as you can see, in 2016, we spent $15,000. 2017, we spent $4,000. In 2018, we had $9,900 budgeted. So I would at least be looking for 6 or 7 at a minimum to catch us up, just to be able to cover the expenses that we have now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? George?
Just a general question. So when your resources are out doing permits and inspections, that's obviously generating revenue,
Yeah, there's some.
Yeah.
Yeah, we usually, most of the inspections are about $50.
and that goes back into the general fund?
That goes back into the general fund,
Yeah.
yes.
Any idea, in a year?
I don't have the number in front of me right now as to what we generate out of that. It's, an amount, but it's not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we did 587, I think, inspections last year. And some of those like a large building like the Rogers Way projects, we may be back there multiple times. And that we don't charge every time we're there and that, so.
All right, any questions from the floor? No? Mr. Luck? Oh, I'm sorry?
Can I make a comment? Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
With respect to what the fire chief said in terms of staffing, him and I share a lot of the same challenges. And I think what he's trying to get at is 5 people probably puts him at a great level. We spoke, 5 people would put me at a better level as well. We have a plan, or our plan is to try to use growth money every year to fund that. It creates, to me, like a paradox, because in 5 years, if there's growth money available, that means that the town grew, and we may never catch up, and that's the problem. He's gonna have the same problem. If he doesn't have 5 people this year, we do it over a period of 5 years, we're gonna have to play catch up again. And I know it just seems like an impossible task with respect to funding all of this. But the problem is that it was ignored for so many years that we're way behind. And I'm going to show you in my presentation, again this year, how understaffed our police department is in comparison to other cities and or other towns of similar demographic and population. So it seems to me, it's a great idea because it doesn't really affect, I understand it doesn't hurt the taxpayers as much. However, I just feel that for right now, it's a good way to do it, but in 5 years, we're going to be starting all over again. And maybe even further behind, I don't know. So
We have 120 housing units coming online with Rogers Way by the end of the year. Probably another 60-something down at Tri-Town.
70 units at Tri-Town. And then, again, if the town continues to grow, we're going to continue to have to catch up all the time. So anyways, I just want to make a comment while I have the opportunity.
Sure.
Brought that point up.
We sing the same song, just different verses.
Okay, Mr. Luck?
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane in Lunenburg. I have one question and then a comment. I certainly would support 5 if we could get there, and I'd be happy to see that on my tax bill. But in terms of accelerating the plan, what's in there now, I think, which is a good start, is 1, as you said, and we'll take it. The 5 is like another 300 and I forget the number, 300 and some odd $1,000 for the full staffing, plus the wagon. What would 1 more be, roughly, Chief, if you could, if we get 1 additional, not the other 4 additional, but 1 additional? How much more?
Right now, do you remember what the exact number was? I don't have the budget pulled up right in front of me right now for 1.
Well, at this point, it would be 49,000 salary, but I don't know what the benefits would turn out to be.
Benefits and
68.
68, oh, so you have it on
Next
that?
person coming on, we'd be looking to get them trained as a paramedic, so that would, it would take a while, but
Right.
there would be an increase eventually with that too, for them.
Right, so it's under $100,000 to get to. I mean, this is so important. The chief showed you the numbers in terms of our aging society, and he also showed you the scary chart. I hope people at home look at it with the red line, and I picture how many people that I know that live outside of that red line, including myself, and this issue of response time is just critical. And I understand that after 6, the on-call people come back, so that, kind of works. But they're on call. They don't get there as quick. They're minutes later, and minutes are 10, 20, 30% less probability of survival. And these are big things. And it's not just even survival, it's the quality of life after, because you might make it, but 3-4 minutes, you may not have a very good quality of life. So this is a huge issue, as you know, to me personally, and thank you very much again, Chairman. I would hope that somehow in this town budget, when I see all the other numbers and things being done, that we could at least get to 2 people this year, to have a little bit of accelerated on that schedule. Maybe the chief could figure out how 2 people could give us a couple more hours of in the station, not on-call people, between that 6 and 8, which is a pretty active period.
2 people with the paramedic training.
We might be able, I wouldn't put you on the spot with that, but
It wouldn't be 100% career coverage, but we'd be pretty close. We'd be
yeah,
getting closer.
if we could get a couple more hours of good coverage, because that's a pretty prime time, I know, in terms of the needs. And I think people don't really fully understand. The chief's doing as good as he can with the people he has in the EMTs and the advanced. But as he said, we count on that other bus getting there with the paramedics. I mean, that is critical to the service. And I don't know when the other bus gets there, if it gets there ahead or later, how much later. He told you, and if you remember, the things that his current guys, even with advance, can't do, and almost every one of those things they can't do started with the word cardiac. It's very limiting. I'm convinced that not only the rapid response, but the reason I'm able to stand here and can actually speak, not so great, but speak, is that I got good treatment between here and the hospital, so that when we got to the hospital, because the paramedics and the teams were there quickly, they're able to get me on a helicopter immediately. And the minutes are critical. If I had to go into the hospital to wait in order to get prepped to go onto that helicopter, I may not be here or be able to speak. This is just so important to our public. For $100,000 a year, I got to believe that we can figure that out and at least accelerate this a little bit and get 2 people this year, and maybe 2 more next year, but at least start with 2 this year, and get this going and do something for the aging population of this community. We do a lot for a lot of other parts of this community. We do a lot of good things for the schools, and that's great, but I think it's time to try to get some more focus on taking care of our senior citizens and people who need this coverage. So, thank you. I hope you can figure it out.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chief Sullivan. I'm sorry. Did you?
Rhonda Lucio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just wanted to echo the comments that I heard from both Chief Marino and Mr. Luck. But I'm gonna side more with, I think we need to fully staff these departments to where they need to be. I think the 2 chiefs that are speaking tonight run the most important service in our town, and it would have the most benefit to the most people, and I'd really like to see us try to figure out a way to do what we have to do here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, thank you, Mr. Chief Sullivan. You can sit down and...
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very informative.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, while we take this pause, this technology pause, do we have any minutes to review? I don't believe we do. I do appreciate you having sent out those minutes again. I don't know why they haven't made it all the way up to the website, but I've sent them
Okay.
about 3 times. I think it might be because she didn't have an assistant for a while.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay, thank you. Come on. Yeah, put arms away. It's all right. One of them will trip over it. I was afraid I was going to trip over something.
I take these. Maybe short one.
Might be a short one.
It's okay. I'll take the.
Excuse me, Chief, do we have one more copy? That's okay. That's fine, that's,
Thank you, Amanda.
thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Chief Marino.
That's all right.
I was reading.
Didn't know if you were ready yet.
Oh, I am, and glad to see that you are too, so.
Well, good to see you. Thanks for having me again. I just want to reiterate what I just said. Or some of what I just said. The fire chief and I share a lot of the same challenges, especially with respect to training, recruitment and retention, and so forth. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. I'm going to just talk about some of the above-target issues tonight, and I'll probably skim over capital, and then, of course, take any questions you have. But let me start by just talking a little bit about the police department, because I know, there's a couple people here. I see a couple new faces, so some of this is probably pretty familiar to you. But I have, besides myself, there's 14 full-time officers. Within those ranks, I have a lieutenant. I have an administrative assistant, detective sergeant, and 3 patrol sergeants and seven patrol officers. One of the patrol officers acts as a canine/traffic enforcement officer. I have another one who's he was our community outreach officer, who's now acting as a school liaison officer, or a school resource officer. The detective sergeant, he's in charge of the investigative unit. In fact, he's the supervisor of the school resource officer, or the community outreach officer. He's currently attached to a federal drug task force to, I guess, do our part with respect to the opiate crisis and so forth. This is just kind of a snapshot of the operating budget. I'm going to try to clarify some of these lines in the following slides. But I first want to touch on the overtime account, because sometimes that comes in a question, so I want to clarify that account. If you look at this slide, in the past several years, the overtime account has typically been underfunded. No different this year. The overtime account's based on 9 personal days, or nine sick days. Most of the officers get 15, but they don't use them every year. Those are accrued. And it seems like I can't get through a year without having somebody get injured, in these cases, off duty. So when they're injured off duty, they have to use their sick time. There's been cases where people have been out for 30, 60, 90 days. And it adversely affects my overtime account. And that's generally the reason why it goes in the red. So every year I've had to move money from other accounts into the overtime account to cover for those problems. This year we had an issue already. We had a recruit in the academy. She got injured. She got injured at the last week of the academy, was able to graduate, but ended up being held out of work for about 40 days, so we had to cover her with overtime. I had a guy out with a gallbladder operation at one point. I had a person out with a knee replacement at one point. That was extended. That was 2 years ago, I believe. So that in itself is what has a real problematic effect with respect to the overtime account. As I said, it's historically underfunded. This year, I know that this slide says that in 2018, we're already at 76%. And again, that's because we've had people out with injuries. But we're actually, when we did this slide, it was probably 3 weeks ago. Now we're up to 91%. we've used already, and we're only into March 1st, so we anticipate that account's gonna go over. Now, as I said, I've been able to move money out of other accounts by doing some creative scheduling and financing. Oftentimes, well, and let me just mention this. There's been, excuse me for a second, I'm having technical difficulty here. I've had issues where we may not have used up all of our lockup money. All right. We may not have used all of our lockup money because maybe our arrest rate wasn't as high as the year before. This has happened in the past 2 years. Our arrest rate has slowly declined over the past 2 years. For no other reason probably than historically, whenever the economy gets better, the arrest rate starts to go down a little bit. It will go back up, but it does start to go down. The jobless rate has an effect on that as well. And we noticed again this year that our arrest rate went down again. So when that happens, we don't use as much lockup money as we normally do, so we're able to move some of that into the overtime account when we need it. Training, which right now is critical, as you know, we're fighting this fight with that whole incident down in Florida, because we have to, whenever those things happen, we have to make sure that we're prepared for anything like that to happen with our town. And again, that's a focus on training again. We're looking at doing active shooter training again this year, which we haven't done for 3 years, so it's necessary. But what I do is I try to schedule training so it comes up at the end of the fiscal year, so I'm actually using training money from the present year and then furthering the training into the next fiscal year, so I'm kind of moving it forward as best as I can by using creative scheduling. Like, we'll take firearms training and try to schedule it for the end of June, so we're actually using fiscal money from this year, and then the second firearms training we'll put over into the following year. So we've been kind of moving it forward every year to try to make things work. This slide here, I did there's 3 slides here which show you that despite the fact that my overtime budget is always in the red, it seems, I do give money back at the end of the year because of some of this creative financing. In fiscal 16, I was able to give back $127 and $1,400 in cruiser maintenance. The following year, cruiser maintenance, again, now that's up to $13,000 I was able to give back. That has a lot to do with the price of gas. Price of gas went down. The cost of maintaining cruisers went down because cruisers are newer. Actually, they're more fuel efficient. The newer ones are more fuel efficient, so, we're able to push some of that money back to the town at the end of the year. I'm sorry, the vehicle maintenance was $8,000 that year. I gave back $13,000 in my budget. And then in FY 18, the total was $46,000, $14,000 of it was vehicle maintenance. So, yeah, I have a problem with my overtime account, although it's always, I think, is underfunded. Some of the other accounts were able to make up for it for those reasons. Lockup, because the arrest rate's down. Vehicle maintenance, because we're using more fuel-efficient cars. The gas prices go down, so we're able to move money around a little bit and try to cover some of those expenses. So it's not like I'm running in the red every year. It's just that overtime account seems to have, we seem to have a problem with the overtime account because we don't really give them the 15 days a year. We only give them 9. And oftentimes, many of the guys don't use any time at all, but it's when somebody gets hurt, and that happens a lot on our job, then it affects the overtime account. Presently, I have 2 people out injured. One is on IOD. That's a different thing. He's covered under Chapter 41, 111F. That comes out of my budget. This was a guy who was, because he was injured on duty, that's a different thing. He was responding to a domestic call. He ended up going down because it was during an ice storm and severely damaged his vertebrae. So he's going to be out for a while on IOD. I got another guy that tore a ligament in his leg, so he'll be out for a while. He's on workman's comp. That will eventually cost me some money in my overtime account. So, you know, it's a high-risk job. We're out there 24/7 in all kinds of weather conditions, and injuries with our job is a fact of life. So, at any rate, I just wanted to explain to you why, if you notice my overtime accounts in the red every year, that's why my budget at the end of the year hasn't been, and I just want to make that known, that I'm not running in the red every year with respect to the entire operating budget. This slide represents some of those above-target requests. This first one, $8,257.15 above, that represents projected benefit coverage for all the staff. Though most of this stuff is caused by pay increases. This is the overtime line. The reason it went up $8,000 is because the union was able to negotiate a raise with their collective bargaining agreement, so it affected the overtime rate because of that raise. The second item here is the desk officer. The Neshoba Valley Dispatch District increased, left less available funds to fund the desk officer. And the funding was $3,200. The deficit was $3,200. And that's why we're looking for that money above target to cover that. What it does is it covers holidays. So when the desk officer takes a holiday off during the week, we can cover the desk from 7 to 7. We've been doing that right along. It's just that the contribution from the Neshoba Valley Dispatch was much more, so it kind of ate into the desk officer budget. We were able to move some money out of my line item budget to try to offset that a little bit. I had asked for a couple radar units this year in my line item budget. I ended up taking that out and moving that $2,500 into this to try to defer the cost of that. You'll see that in the recommended budget. It'll come up on the recommended budget that we pretty much wiped that figure out to try to fund that desk job on holidays. We feel that's important. As you'll see in the next segment, there's a request for funding the desk job all weekend long. We've been trying to do that for a couple of years. I've kind of put it on the back burner because I think funding a police officer position is more of a priority. I'd put this at the second, though. If I had to prioritize them, I'd say this was second. Obviously, we want to provide exposure for the public. We want the public to be able to come to this public safety building and actually find a body inside of it instead of picking up the phone outside and calling the Neshoba Dispatch and waiting for an officer to show up at the station. So, although it's in here, as I said, I put that at a number 2 priority and additional staffing at a number 1. So, you may not see that on a recommended budget. Department clerical, that's increasing the public safety coordinator from 72 to 80 hours. For years, the public safety coordinator, which is my administrative assistant, worked 36 hours. She originally started working 40 hours way back in the 80s because she actually worked 8 hours for the fire chief and 32 hours for the police chief. So when we moved over to the public safety building, the fire chief got his own administrative assistant, and they pushed her up to 36 hours, because obviously as the town grew, the police department was busier, and we needed more assistance from the public safety coordinator. Well, that's been for years now, the 36-hour thing. I think it's really not adequate. I'm looking to push her up to at least 40 hours. You can see in that handout I gave you, that narrative I did for the town manager, that you can see what her job description entails, and I can tell you in addition to that, that she's going to be working to support my efforts to get the police department accredited. She's going to be assisting me to do that in addition to everything else she does. She's currently in training to become a reserve police officer, which is not a mandate for that position, but it's a recommendation, because we train female officers to become sexual assault investigators. The state, although they don't mandate it in the statute, and I think you'll find this maybe in your handout, or maybe not, maybe I didn't include it, I think I did, but under 4197B, the statute says that each department shall make efforts to employ women police officers to serve in said units being sexual assault units. And that's a real important aspect of this type of investigation, because a lot of women will not talk to men about those things. So we have to have women available. Currently, we have one other sexual assault investigator, female sexual assault investigator. We have about 3 male sexual assault investigators, and I'm going to train a third one, because we got to make sure that somebody's available all the time. I got to have a pool to pick from in case somebody comes in and makes an allegation that we have to investigate. So that becomes a very important part of the public, or the public safety coordinator's job. And as a matter of fact, Linda Carrier, before she retired, well, way back in 1983, I believe it was, we trained her to become a sexual assault investigator. She kept up with the training her entire career, and she just retired back in July. And now I've replaced her, and the replacement, I would like to work 40 hours a week. I'd like to, and again, I've already sent her to training. Matter of fact, she's almost done. She'll be done in a couple weeks with her training, and then we'll send her with the reserve training, and then we'll send her to the sexual assault training. So, the next on the list of items above target are equipment maintenance. It looks like a significant increase, but what I'm asking for in that line is to fund our Narcan. We need to keep a supply of Narcan on hand. That's what that comes out of, and that Narcan seemed to increase in price because of the supply and demand, I guess. Quick clot and tourniquets, I haven't replaced those for a couple of years. That's an important thing. That's something new that the police are carrying in the last 4 or 5 years. That goes along with their requirement to be first responders. So that quick clot is a chemical that stops bleeding immediately, and tourniquets as well. You know what tourniquets are? They can stop traumatic bleeding quickly with tourniquets, so they all carry them now. And let me, while I'm talking about that, I heard this comment from somebody in town the other day, and somebody I was surprised to hear from, that although there's going to be 70 55 and older units at Tri-Town Landing, that it will not affect the police response there. Well, let me clarify that, because I know you know this, but for the public, the police are first responders. We're out there patrolling the streets. We're the ones that are going to be there first. And we don't seem to get a lot of credit for that these days. The police go to medical calls and fires first. The fire department has a great response. We support them. When they get there, obviously, if it's a fire or a medical call, they're going to take that over. That's their purview. But the police are required to respond. They're trained They're trained in first aid and CPR and the use of AEDs, and they get there first. So I was a little upset about hearing that the police don't need to respond, or it has nothing to do with us, like it's not gonna affect our calls for service. Our calls for service are affected by medical calls and fire calls as well. So, at any rate, I'm asking for that, and probably the most expensive piece, and it's a one-time request in my budget, is this TASER cabinet. And what that is it's a cabinet to put the tasers in that's locked and it has a transponder system like we have with our doors, so we can take our key transponder and wave it by the cabinet, and it electronically unlocks the door, and it leaves a fingerprint. It tells us who took the taser, what time, what day, and so on and so forth. Tasers are probably more regulated than guns in the state. Anytime we light a taser up, even if it's just the laser thing, we have to report that to the state. So obviously we want to try to keep those things safe when they're not in use, not just thrown in a closet and so forth, and have somebody walk off with a taser. So I'm asking, whether or not there's money for that. I'd like to at least make that purchase. If it can happen, it can happen. Like I said, some of these things are more priority. Quick clot's a priority, Narcan obviously is a priority. Can I do without the cabinet? Yes, I can. It's not like number one, but it will be number two again on my priority list for those reasons. Office supplies, I'm asking for a little increase. This is really fueled by ink cartridges, as you all well know. Or maybe you don't, I don't know. We buy ink cartridges, and some of them are $300 a piece for the types of reports, or the types of printing equipment we use. And obviously, we generate a ton of paperwork 24/7. We report on everything. So it's really short money. It may not even cover what we need, but I got to get some kind of increase in that line item to cover some of those, primarily the ink cartridges. The radar unit, as I said, it's in white because that's gone. Training course fees, the $3,200 increase in that would go with the entire, which I'll get, the next slide I'll clarify this. If we hire another officer, we're going to need $3,200 in training course fees to get him trained for that first year. And adding one officer, that's the only other thing I think that we have over the target amount. Within the cost breakdown, you can see, well, actually, you can't see in the cost breakdown. Oh, you do. The academy fees in the cost breakdown. So you can see that amount, that $3,200 amount in there. So we added that to training course fees, but it's actually part of that whole above target figure. I just wanted to clarify it with this cost break. This is everything. This is what it would cost to hire somebody. Completely. That's a complete list of items of zero-based cost breakdown. So that's probably my biggest priority this year is again, increasing the size of the police department. I'm going to sound like the fire chief here, but it's really the same story. Calls for service increase again this year. That's the 5-year look at calls for service. It never really goes down. Calls for service always go up. Arrests kind of, and you'll see that in a bit, arrests kind of go up and down. Offense numbers typically, incidents rather, go up. They don't really go down often. This chart here, I show this to you every year. These are reasons why we have to call people in on overtime or keep them over. this comes out of our investigations and field services accounts. These are cases where they've either had to stay because of an incident, or they have to get called in for an incident. They may have to stay because they have somebody under arrest and they can't leave them. I'll give you an example. The other night, this won't show up on this because this is the first 6 months, but the other night, and this happens constantly, not this particular set of circumstances, but we're calling people in or keeping them over for an hour or 4 hours or whatever is typical. The other night, the sergeant was committed at a dead body scene. We had a guy in a car accident, broke a pole, and they were the only two guys working, so I had nobody to take calls. I happened to be in a station working on a police car, so I had to get somebody to call. I had to get somebody in quickly. Otherwise, I would have put my uniform back on and go on a call, which isn't a problem, but we had to get somebody in to cover calls for 4 hours so that they could deal with that. Oh, and I had to get somebody to go to the car accident from another town until the guy got called in. I had a guy at the hospital too with another case. That's what it was. We were just a mess that night. So this is what happens. We have to call in help. We have no choice. I did this comparison a couple of years ago. Matter of fact, John liked it and asked me to do it again, so here it is. Let me clear this up.
About that?
I can make it clear with the next slide. This is the same exact graph I used a couple of years ago, but I changed the number. I called around, got the new data, and changed the numbers. It hasn't changed much. I mean, the crime rate's gone down. Again, jobless rate, crime rates goes down, arrest rates go down, and so forth. But you look at it, it was still way above them. And I'll tell you, one of the chiefs I talked to from one of these towns said that he spent $405,000 in overtime last year, which floored me. $405,000. So, I mean, it made me feel good. We're only up to $130,000, but just in comparison here, you can see we're way above everybody, and we only have 15 people. The only one that this year, the chief from Pepperell said that he lost 3 people, and they're trying to get 3 more, plus they want to add one, so they'll probably be up to 19. And they were typically around 18 all the time. 3 years ago, I think, when I did this, or 2 years ago, they were at 18. But all of these towns, the reason I picked these towns is you can see the population's pretty close based on the 2010 census, but they're all pretty close to or surrounded by cities like New Bedford, Fall River, and so on and so forth. So I thought they'd make for a good comparison. Most of them have like anchor stores like Walmart. I think one of them is near Amazon or something like that. So I thought they'd make a great comparison. So I brought this back from last year, I think. I did this Michigan State study on workload analysis. Again, the reason I brought this back, nothing has changed here. This is evidence-based. This is basically the Department of Justice saying, and the FBI saying, this is what our research tells us you should have police officers. So up in the Northeast region, it's 2.6, or in our case, it'd be over 26 officers. Or there's another version of this population of jurisdiction, which I don't even know what difference that makes, because my figures are about the same as the regional, but that would be 19 to 20 based on our population. The next slide, I used this again last year. This is the Michigan State study. I plugged our numbers into it. It's based primarily on calls for services, so ours went up, so I didn't even bother doing it again because the numbers are the same. They're probably going to be higher because our calls for services are higher. This is a more accurate approach to it. It's a workload study. As you can see, just to take calls, now that 4.8, 4.7, 5.0, that's just going on call. That's like somebody calls and says, we need the police. The 8, 7, and 8, that's to meet requirements. That's so we can offer officer-initiated calls, pull over cars, go to alarm, not alarm calls, but do community outreach calls, those kinds of things. The other thing is just bare bones, in other words. So, again, it shows that we're at a bare bones level as it is. We really should be up, and my math tells me that we're somewhere around probably 23 people. This says around 24. Believe me, at this point, I'd be comfortable with 20. So anyways, looking at that, looking at growth, I don't want to, you guys, you're very, very familiar with the growth in Lunenburg. I went over the building department and I got these figures, but I'm sure by now you've seen them. The 120 apartments obviously is that project over in Whalum, the luxury apartment project. Tri-Town Landing, again, is adding 70 units. I guess it's going to be 55 or older. This is a photo of Whalum luxury apartments. Ecological Fibers, they're adding on, pretty sizable building. Unitel, that should be open pretty soon. That's going to be another thing that we have to worry about. And let me just say this, I had this conversation with a member of the planning board. These people come in and they start even the smallest business. And I use this as an example. This small business came in, it's a glass company, they put car windshields in down here on Mass Ave. Not a huge business, however, it does affect our calls for service, be it not huge, but somebody's gonna pull out of there, get in a car accident, he's gonna call because some car got vandalized that was left there overnight, he's gonna have an alarm system we're gonna have to respond to. So I need to know about these things because it affects our calls for service. That's only one example. You get a bunch of little examples like that and our calls for service go up and we have to deal with it. So anyways, Unitel is another one. Honey Farms was built down there. That's been subject to quite a few calls. Actually, we've been over to the luxury apartments already. And already we had a call over there with somebody who was related to use of edible marijuana case. Where somebody was sick. So I hope that's not an indication, but anyways, Paul, Stone and Gravel, we know that's there. And of course, Emerald Place. Again, I don't want to bore you with all this, so. As far as capital goes, every year I'm going to need patrol cars every year. This coming year, I asked for a couple patrol cars. I asked for, thanks. Again, this year I asked for body armor, riot control gear. That's the gear that goes along with the whole training, active shooter training, critical incident response to calls like that. That's, again, we live and die on being prepared. If I'm not prepared, it's like a firefighter going into a building without a Scott air pack on. That would be us running into a building without a plate vest or ballistic helmet on. So I asked for those items. Duty gear, again, we prioritize all this stuff. This gear we issued, I think, 6 or 7 years ago. It just gets all worn out. The holsters become unreliable because there's mechanical parts to them and they just get worn out, and I have to replace. That's important stuff. That's stuff they wear every day. I asked for that ATV or UTV again this year. Again, it's all about being prepared and being able to respond to any call that's thrown at us. Somebody calls us and says, somebody's hurt out in the woods, we got to respond out in the woods, and can't do that in a police car. They're not designed for that. If somebody calls and says there's a ATV ripping up their lawn, and I say, I'm sorry, we can't respond to that. We have nothing to go out in the woods to chase those things around. We can't do it in a police car. You know, the public's response to that is basically, well, yeah, the police are useless and, you know, obviously really bad for our integrity. We can't have that. And, you know, we'll try to go out of our way anyway to help anybody any way we can, but, you know, this equipment's important. I mean, we don't want the public to see, you know, we don't want them to think that we're ineffective. You know, we have to be effective as a law enforcement agency. We asked for a patrol boat. We had a 1993 patrol boat. We've had so much trouble with it trying to, you know, patrol the Whaleman, mostly Lake Shirley, that we were looking to, you know, replace that. And the last couple of boats we bought, the Police Relief Association paid for them. We just don't have that kind of funding anymore. So we're looking to replace that in capital. So, unless I missed something, you have any questions, you know, I thank you for putting up with me again this year, and I hope I didn't take up too much of your time.
Thank you for another great
Thank you.
presentation. I will ask on the line that you did request for overtime, is it going to address your overtime need for next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes,
The $14,000 increase over,
yes.
okay.
Provided somebody with, like me, about 5,000 sick days doesn't go out sick for 2 years. You know?
Well, we'll hope not. Questions, Mark?
Thanks, Chief. Going back to your chart of organization, I see that there are, by my count, 4 vacant positions.
Yep.
So does that represent what the organization would be if it were fully staffed?
No, it doesn't. I just haven't updated it.
Okay, second question would be, in the town manager's recommendation, we are adding 1 position. Where would that position fall on the org chart?
Days. What happened last year was you had asked me to make the officer a school resource officer.
Right.
So obviously, we took Sean Zarate, he's our community policing officer, community outreach guy, put him over the schools. The guy we hired that, you know, you funded last year, we put him on 3 to 11. Oh, we tried to. He's out, he got injured in the police academy. So we're not gonna see him for about 6 months. Because once he's well, I gotta put him through another police academy. But, you know, that's just information. I want you to know that. There's no danger because of that of taking Sean Zarate out of the schools. We're going to keep him there till school closes. We may need to move him this summer to cover that guy for a while. But my plan is, if I get another person, I'm going to put him on days. Days and evenings are the 2 busiest shifts.
Right.
And days, you know, I've been meeting with Loxie. I met with her 3 times this week, or in the past 5 days, I think it's been. You know, because we're obviously we want to be prepared, you know. My biggest fear is, I told her this today, if something happens, I got the best response plan. I can have everything in place, and I'm relying on response from every single town around us, from the state police, from SEMLEC, and everybody else. Well, you know, they're not going to be here in 5 minutes. That's the problem.
Right.
And I'm going to have, 2 or 3 people on the road? So, well, it's going to be, you know what I mean? It's scary. So, yeah, that guy's going to, I would put him on days, just for that reason. I want somebody around on days. And it's busy. The stats show us that days and evenings is busy. You know, not so much as, you know, 11 to 7 is a little slow. Problem with 11 to 7 is when something happens, usually it's bad. You know, obviously I got called out of my house back in October for a shooting. It was 1,000 feet from my driveway. That was at, you know, you probably heard there was a officer-involved shooting. So usually those things, that shift, things go bad quick. And we only have 2 guys on that shift all the time. So, you know, that should be covered more, you know, I think. I did it alone. When I first came on 39 years ago, I was alone on 11 to 7, or midnight to 8. So things have changed a little bit, you know. Wasn't that busy then, but it was a little hairy sometimes, so. But anyways, yeah, that's long, short answer is days.
Thank you.
Any other questions? John?
Not a question as much as an observation. This comparison of towns.
Yep.
If I took a look at the 10 towns you've got that have data for it, the 10 towns have an average of a little over 20 officers, and we're at 15. So, yeah, that really is compelling.
It is compelling. And there's no exaggeration in that at all, believe me, I wouldn't do that. As you see, I'm not going to name the town. You can see the town that didn't call me back, so, this year. I know where they are, but I'm not going to guess at it either.
Yeah.
And I don't go by the internet. You know, you can look up these things on the internet, not very accurate, I found. It's better to call the police chief and say, okay, how many guys you got? You know, really got, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, anybody can follow that up if they want and talk to the chiefs and ask them, but it's all good data, and I'm always shocked myself when I hear it, you know. And, but anyways, it is what it is, I guess.
So,
George, go
all
ahead.
set?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So Chief, with the new hire, do you see that offsetting some of the overtime that you're paying?
No.
No.
No, not at this point. I think down the road, if the department becomes big enough, then we can be creative with our help. But it just defeats the purpose of hiring people if you don't cover them. So, no, I don't, honestly, I'm being honest.
Yep.
I could tell you, yeah, we'll just not hire somebody when, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna, that's unrealistic, and it's counterproductive, I think. It just doesn't make sense. Why bother then, if you're not gonna keep your numbers up? Because that's why I need them. I'd be standing there lying to you if I said, I need help, but if he can't come in tonight, I'm not gonna hire anybody to cover him. That just defeats the purpose totally of hiring him. And that's just my opinion, but I think it's valid, based on our numbers. But I think down the road, if we get big enough, we could probably do some creative scheduling to try to cut that number down. And again, we don't, our overtime is just based on sick time and vacation time and personal days. That's it. The rest of it, the investigation and field services, I don't think that's a huge number every year, considering the amount of calls for service we have and everything. I think that's a pretty short number.
Any questions, George? Oh, okay.
I get just one more. So
Sure.
I'm just reading your description on the desk officer.
Yeah.
So they're responsible for monitoring anybody who's been put into the jail?
Yes.
So,
When the desk officer is there, we don't hire prisoner watch, so that's how we've been able to save money as well in our prisoner watch budget. So that's between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. That's just one of her, and she works till 3, and then we fill the 4 hours per diem with reserve officers, but that's just one of her responsibilities. And the good thing was, what happened, where we saved a lot of money is, see, if somebody gets off, before we had her, somebody gets off at 7 a.m., so they work 11 to 7 watching a prisoner, we'd actually have to hire somebody for 4 hours, so from 7 to 11, when in fact, the prisoner gets transported to court at 8:30. So it was kind of a lot of wasted money, but we had no choice because it's a contractual thing, we have to pay him 4 hours. Now we don't do that. She's in at 7 o'clock, this 11 to 7 guy goes home, so we save a little money there too. But she's busy. You probably saw in our report again, she did 93 offenses, there'll be, I think it's 4,000 people walk in the lobby or something like that this year. It's a lot, to deal with, that she has to deal with, whether it's big or small. And then like 7,000 phone calls that she takes, in addition to doing all the pistol permitting. And she just does the applications, Amanda does all the processing. 2 different things, but she does the sex offender registry. I mean, without her, I honestly don't know how I'd operate. I'd have to hire another Amanda to do the job anyway, quite honestly, so, you can understand why I need her for 40 hours as well. We're just buried. Administratively, we're swamped. The lieutenant, who's sitting right here, I could give him another 40 hours. Court alone, everything today is, public records is a nightmare now. Courts are constant evidence. We need evidence for this, evidence for that. We need tapes, we need video recordings. That's all he does all day long is chase evidence. Big job, huge job, so. Administratively, we're strapped. So down the road, we get big enough, I'm gonna have to have another administrative officer on days, eventually. We're just getting that big, we're getting that big. We gotta just come to that realization, So, anyway.
Other questions for the chief? Oh, we're good? No. Mr. Passios.
Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. Two questions. One is a data question. Wondering if you have any data numbers on the number of incidents and/or investigations initiated through the phone at the front of the station. In other words, after hours, somebody coming to the station and there's nobody there, so they have to use the phone to call central dispatch.
Dave, I can tell you right now, I don't. I have no way to track that. That's been a bone of contention with me for a couple of years. I really don't have any way of tracking that.
Do you have a feel for it? It's happens on a regular basis. It happens very...
I can tell you this. I've gotten complaints from the patrol guys, because what happens when you don't have a desk person there, every time somebody picks up a phone, they might be out doing something, they gotta come running back to the station, and they're in the middle of a call or something, you know what I mean? And I've gotten complaints that's, particularly on the weekends, that's become annoying, so to speak. Because don't forget, if they're at a call, they don't want to just rush through it. And if you're in our shoes, when you're at a call and you're trying to deal with it, and then all of a sudden they're calling you saying, hey, somebody's at the front desk, you tend, human nature tells you, I got to get through this, and now this person you're dealing with doesn't really get what they need. Maybe the service they deserve, and he's running off, so.
Right, but for the most part, don't these people communicate that they're reporting something, or is it more they need to speak to an officer?
It's a lot of it's I need to speak to an officer.
Okay.
And honestly, that's not a bad thing, because what happens is if they start saying what they go through this whole diatribe of what they need, then they got to repeat it to us again.
Right.
And the dispatch is really, they only need the basics, and they're busy, and the show's really busy, so, they have to keep that down to a bare minimum.
Yeah, okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
One other quick question. The vacant positions that you show on your organizational chart, which you happen to have right up here in front of me, many departments have vacant positions that are actually funded in their budget, but they don't have a body in that position.
Yeah.
Is that the case in this organizational chart?
No, that's just wishful thinking,
Okay,
basically.
thank you very much.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Chief Marino, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Again, if there's anything else, just email me or something.
We know where you are, and we know where we can get
John knows
coffee.
exactly
Yeah,
Yeah.
coffee and banana bread.
Oh, yeah.
I remember.
Always a hit.
Okay, then we'll move on to, do we have a town manager report? Okay, then I'd just like to confirm that next week we will be hearing from Monty Tech and the Sewer Commission. That's correct, okay. So it's not, the public schools will not be until the week after. That's correct, okay, very good. Do we have any committee or department updates? No, none of those. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. I'm looking at
Just that the Charter Review Committee met last evening, and we did a full pass through an early draft of proposed changes. We kind of categorized them into those things that are relatively minor changes, that seem to have general agreement. And then those issues that are more complex and will require further discussion, we pretty much made it through the easy changes last night. We didn't take any votes, but we made pretty good progress. We meet again next week. We actually meet 3 times in March, let me put it that way.
Yeah, and for anybody interested, those meetings are recorded, so they are available on YouTube, if you don't happen to see it on your TV going by. Okay, then, again, we'll be here again next Thursday night for Monty Tech and the Sewer Commission. And with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.